So what is a crisis? What do you guys think about when you think something is a crisis?
I think it is something that normally you could handle, but so much is coming toward you that you're not able to, it overwhelms you. You're not able to handle uh, an event or something that happens, an emergency or incident or something.
Okay, go ahead, Anna. What do you got to say about it?
Oh, I was going to say the same, but it throws you off balance. It's something that you really can't handle, or something that's got to be taken care of right away. Right away. There's no getting around it. That's a crisis to some people.
Okay, you said something to handle right away. Sometimes it's something that you can deal with, do something about right away, and sometimes it's not, but the impact is immediate. Go ahead, Tolan.
So I think of a crisis as unbearable event or situation or circumstance that is so out of control that I need intervention or somebody else need intervention.
An intervention, okay. Has anybody that's participating today not experienced a crisis in their life?
Y'all hear me?
I'm saying, has anybody here not experienced a crisis?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Toem? So everybody.
Did y'all hear? Did I freeze on you?
You're freezing? Okay. I can
froze?
You're saying stuff, Tolan, but it's not coming through sometimes, but we can still hear you and see you. Okay, so
okay. So I just
okay, so I mean, what I'm trying to get at is everybody has gone through an extreme emotional time, something that's very. A crisis can be broken plumbing. Absolutely, that is a crisis, especially when you get the plumber's bill. But right, how are you going to handle that? It's water, it's urgent, right? And other crises are just like that too, right? You've got this perhaps rushing water that you got to turn off so that it doesn't damage other things, right? And then you got to fix whatever it was that caused that to break, so you've got to act. It really throws you off. Webster defines crisis as a crucial time, a turning point in the course of anything. When people are thrown off balance by an ensuing event, and I don't particularly interested about the Chinese characters but I never took that out of here. Chinese character for crisis is made up of two symbols, one for despair and one for opportunity. And most of us don't look at it as opportunity, but it is when it's a changing point, it can be moving toward something positive. Go ahead, Madeline.
Yeah, because if you look at the coronavirus crisis, it was despair, but yet it was opportunity also. And even if it didn't impact you directly, you still had to know how to navigate throughout, and it was an opportunity to make changes in society, in the way things are done. When people found out, oh, I'm an essential worker, you need me. Okay, no longer am I going to be looked down upon and be satisfied with the crumbs of financial salary or monetary that you give me. No, I know that you need me, so you're going to pay me like you need me, and other issues that you know arose from it, with the George Floyd incident, because the whole world was shut down. People were now able to look at that situation and not just bypass it on the news coming and going, but were inundated with it, seeing it, and wow, that's another crisis. We have a problem going on. We need to make some changes. So yeah, opportunity and despair.
Right.
I understand. Mm-hmm.
Right. And as Christians, with God, his opportunities and his open doors are long reaching, right? I mean, some people are opportunists. We also see during that time that people would buy up sanitizer and then sell it for an astronomical rate, and people had to, well, there was some kind of a regulation made so that, you know, you examining whether people were charging like these exorbitant rates was too much profit that they were benefiting, you know. So people do take an advantage of people in a difficult situation. So a crisis also talks about here in the fourth point, a turning point where we can move toward growth, enrichment, and improvement, or toward dissatisfaction, pain, or dissolution. So we can get just so overwhelmed and discouraged by the situation that we don't find another way out, right? When people lose a job, they may think, well, this is, you know, a catastrophe, it's the end, but it could be that the Lord is moving you into a different field, right? During the 2008 crash, so many people were able to get training to go into a different type of field that maybe they wouldn't have tried before. And a lot of commerce ends up dying out, right? There's different things in manufacturing that get phased out. And so, you know, you can move on into a new opportunity, more sometimes better paying, sometimes less stressful, but a pivotal point in a person's life, an opportunity or danger. So we always have a tendency to look at the negative, I think. And when you're going through this kind of stuff, obviously, and you see threat and danger, you're not looking at the good. You know, you're looking at it as a threat. So crises are internal reactions to external hazards. Okay. There's 4 common elements of a crisis. Okay, a hazardous event, something that's perceived as threatening. A child could be walking along the street and see a dog charging at them from out of his yard, right? And this is an emergency type of situation, but the dog is on a tether and it can't go any farther, right? But the child doesn't know it, and you think this dog is going to come attack you. So it can be something that's perceived as threatening. We have to be in a vulnerable state. A vulnerable state when we're emotionally depleted, when we're not strong, when things are piling on top of each other. It affects us differently than when we have support, when we are strong and, you know, we feel good, when we're encouraged, when we're confident, when we're not depressed or sick, we can face things a lot more ably when we're not in a vulnerable state. So to look at a vulnerable state is how well were you or they functioning prior to the event, right? If you're needing people to call you up to encourage you, if you're needing someone to help you physically, and then something happens, then you're more vulnerable, right? We look at aged people as more vulnerable because they're more easily deceived, and there's a lot of scammers out there, and it really angers me that people take advantage of elderly people, you know, and cheat them like that. But so how do we get to a vulnerable state, right? When we get depleted, when we don't get enough rest, when we have too many things going on, when we're spread out and trying to handle too many things at one time, if we've had some emotional family issues or relationship issues, when we've been reprimanded at our job, when, you know, or for example, being bullied, right? I mean, I got teased when I was young, you know, but how was I? How did I handle it? Did people gang up on me, or was it just, you know, isolated incidences? You know, some of these things stand out too. I know someone, you know, that had just a bunch of different things happen to them as they were growing up, and so they're very much more sensitive to lack of understanding, and so things throw them, events throw them, or criticism throws them, or people not agreeing with them, it throws them off much more easily and readily than it would do for me. You know, so often how you grow up and what you've been taught as you're growing up helps you to be either stronger or more vulnerable. And as Christians, when we know who we are in Christ, okay, it's not Trish, the great, you know, superwoman, it's me upheld in God's hands. You know, so I know that when I'm going through stuff, and I do have to remind myself, I think you guys all have to remind yourself too, when we're going through things, that God is with me, God is for me. Nothing is going to pluck me out of his hand. And, you know, nothing that I'm going through takes God by surprise. So he must have made a provision for it. But when we're in the midst of this situation, it's hard for us to see. So we have an event that happens. A branch falls on our roof. Okay. We're in a vulnerable state. Well, my husband just left me. My dog just died. You know, the plumbing goes haywire, and now this happens, right? So there's also a precipitating factor. Okay, in that incident, I had a number of different things happening, but that's the last straw. This is the thing that throws me over the edge. Okay. So when we're looking at somebody dealing in a crisis, is how were they handling events before this event? And that helps us to when we're supporting and dealing with people. So the state of active crisis, symptoms of stress, attitude of panic or defeat, a focus on relief. So many people try to do anything they can to get out of the situation. Someone who is facing astronomical bills because a family member is being treated for cancer, or they have a life-threatening disease, and how am I going to provide for my family? Well, then they do something weird like go out and commit a robbery, right? They're focusing on relief. Or you see that when with substance abuse, right? Or even just binge drinking, right? We're trying to get out from it. We're taking some pills or we're just sitting in front of the TV just to get out from underneath the situation. And it's a time of lowered efficiency. So as H. Norman Wright mentioned in the video last week about the teenager who was going through some things, who had witnessed a shooting, right? He encouraged or exhorted the teachers to expect a little bit less, because when you are in a state of crisis, when you're having an emergency situation that is not just for the second and it's over, we do things with less abilities, less than what we can normally do. We talked about in a death of someone, not being able to handle their finances and banking. I think I mentioned that my great aunt just experienced that with the loss of my godfather, that for years and years and years she's handled the bills and did all these things, but just after he passed, she needed her daughters and daughters-in-law were helping her just go through things and helping her to make sure things were paid. And she was kind of bewildered why this was happening to her. But she was in a lowered time of efficiency, and that happens too. We're not able to make reasonable decisions. And so in these types of things, to act hastily is not recommended at all, right? Go ahead, Etta.
Okay, now I was thinking about during the pandemic when children had to put masks and then they had to readjust their classrooms and things like that. And they said that their grades were lower. They couldn't read and write, and they couldn't perform as they, thought they should. So I think that had something to do with it. But also, I was thinking about kids now have to go to school and think about, hey, is someone going to come in here and shoot up the place? They have to work under these kinds of situations. So I think that it's a lot of factors like those that I just mentioned that add to why the children's grades and their performances and things are, like that are lower now.
Right, there's a number of different factors in that, right?
Right.
As far as what type of a student and how much attention and explanation. The isolation, I think, was a lot. We're social beings. God created us to live in communities, and so it was all over a different whole something that we've not experienced this, but and then you have the media that's trying to feed into the anxiety. Okay. Any other comments about what we just were talking about? So I just want to reiterate that just because you have a crisis situation does not mean that we experience a trauma from it and don't navigate it with a sense of security, right? It takes a lot of different things to bring it to the point where we can't handle it. The event, our state, what is it that actually throws us over, right? And what is that last straw? And then we have those different symptoms: stress, attitude of panic or defeat, wanting to get out, doing whatever we can to get out from under it, and inability to function at our normal capacity. So there are some balancing factors. what helps us outside of the Lord, beyond having the Lord in our corner, right? An adequate perception. Okay, what is it in the scheme of things? When you're first going through it, you can't see it for the level of seriousness or the whole range. You can't see from A to Z. You're just focusing on M and the impact at that time. So we're able to see from the outside and give a balance to see how does that affect all the other dominoes in our lives, okay, and help them to reframe it, to see it in the view of a in the long run, right? Because we're looking at, I crashed my car, I can't get to work, I'm gonna lose my job, I'm not gonna be able to pay my bills, I'm gonna lose my place to live, I'm going to get all this stuff done. But, when you're helping to set out the different steps of, it takes a long time to resolve these type of issues, but looking at things from the outside and helping them to see it with a different lens. So understanding the range of the effect, but also having a support network, right? When you have people that can help us, right? In today's society, there's so many people, they don't have family members close to them to help them when there's a problem. I remember when we had our first daughter, my mom and mother-in-law, they stepped right in and helped us out with just different things, just sometimes taking Amy for a day or two, or being able to fill in. And when there was something come up and they needed we needed somebody to help with my daughter. But today we have more dysfunction in families, and so people don't have people that they can count on, and some of that can be professional help, right? If you don't have daycare, if you don't have a church family that can help, or you don't have counselors, right? Then we're not as able to get through things. And our coping mechanism, how we deal with things. Do we bury things and ignore them and let them just accumulate till it gets to where we can't manage it anymore? There's different ways that people handle difficulties. Today they talk with children, they do a lot about helping them to calm themselves down. And, there's breathing techniques, but what is it that we do? Do we just ignore it, bury our heads? Do we go to sleep? Do we hide in the TV or in the internet? Do we use substances? So what kind of strategies do people have for dealing with stress? And if something is of a limited duration, when you have years and years of war, that's when it's a short-term illness versus a long illness. We forget, for example, that, in the book of Job, what he went through was about 9 months. When we look at the woman with the issue of blood, I believe it was that she had gone 12 years in that situation. Right? So when something doesn't last forever and ever, and we can see the end to it, even if it's a ways away, we're also able to handle something. If we look like it's going to be forever, then it makes it difficult for us to deal with it. Okay. So we read. Okay, people have different needs during a crisis and different ways of coping. So I want to see, can I pull this up? Do I have it out? Yeah. In Psalm 34, all right, it says, I'm reading from the Amplified, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their distress and troubles. The Lord is close to those who are of a broken heart and saves such as are crushed with sorrow for sin and humbly and thoroughly penitent. So in this type of situation, we can help point to how we've managed to get through things, especially if the people are not Christians and they don't have that awareness of God. And some people in just religious circles, they forget the reality of our relationship with God. Okay. Any thoughts? Pardon me. Okay. I noticed that there's not a lot of slides in this section, so a lot of the material, this is just reinforcing what are in the different chapters in the crisis and trauma book. Okay, so we can understand that there's different phases of a crisis. The impact phase, when it's hitting you, right? When you realize I have this diagnosis, and okay, there's the withdrawal and confusion stage. There's could be emotional turmoil. We could be depressed or worn out. We can experience the wilderness, a feeling of danger, that we're at an impasse. We can feel apathy, and helplessness, which are two different things, right? Helplessness is I don't have anything I can do about it. Apathy, I don't really care, I can't do anything about it, so I'm just gonna, let it fall. We can feel urgency, we can feel discomfort. Okay. And then, and we need to remember this when we're on the outside, that when something is hitting somebody, that they're not ready for the solution. This is what they're feeling. This is what they're going through. And so as they're moving in and out of these different phases, we need to be supportive. And while we can point to a long run solution, the end solution, sometimes it hits them the wrong way, right? Well, you don't understand what I'm going through. And I may not understand the specific emotions, but I have gone through urgent disasters, right? So then we're making the adjustment where we're understanding where we are. We're no longer trying to act under the normal state. And here we're trying to realize, okay, there's changes that need to be made for me to be functioning. I'm making changes in my attitudes and looking at, all right, now it's time, for me to do something about this. Okay. And the reconstruction phase. So you're making changes, and the reconstruction is now it's rebuilding, right? It's a hope. We are showing them that this is where we can go with this, and we're starting to work toward getting out of that hole. Any thoughts? So there are many different type of crises. There's health crises, emotional crises, which a lot of it all does become emotional, right? Financial. I can't think of anything else offhand, but we're intervening and trying to change the direction, right? Instead of proceeding down into the hole or falling off the cliff, we're stopping it and trying to divert, so that we need to implement an immediate intervention, right? If somebody has a fire, the first thing, and they can't live in their house, the first thing that needs to be taken care of is finding a place to stay for right now. Okay. There's other things later on. You would need to find more long-term housing, rebuilding, finding a whole nother place to live. There's things that go on, but at the minute you have to stop the bleeding, right? That's the first thing. When somebody, before you can treat anything else in a person, if they're in a car accident, you stop the bleeding. So that's what we're trying to do. So we need to take action or facilitate or direct them how to move. Oh, I forgot. Under the implementing intervention, there's some steps here that I didn't look at here. I'm sorry. So we need to listen to what they're saying, hear what the problem is. So we need to listen. We need to assess what is the actual situation and what needs to be done. And we talked about that a little bit when we did the interview, right? Where you do the assessment and interview somebody and you try to figure out what it is that actually needs to be done. We normalize the situation. So it's hard to normalize. Oh, this is normal that everybody's thrown out into the street. No, it's not normal, but you're not the only one that this has happened to. And because you're not the only one, I'll get you a second, Tolman. Let me finish my thought. You're not the only one. There are people that have gone through this. So there are steps we can take to resolve it. So I'm not the only one that has gotten depressed. I'm not the only one that has tried to end my life. I'm not the only one that has lost my job. These things have happened to other people and they have been able to get through it and move forward. Go ahead, Tolan.
So I had a thought. You had mentioned something, and so I have a question because you mentioned about different forms of crisis, right? And you mentioned emotional and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know, crises. No, is there some crises that's external, not internal?
You mean like your feelings
So
and your person, your like
I
your
would
soul? What do you mean?
when I think about feelings, I would think that more internal. So like external is, which we know probably external can lead to internal. I was thinking like somebody that lost a limb, like a leg or something like that. Would that be considered a crisis, even though physically they're not what they used to be? Would that trigger it's internal crisis, but started external?
Well, yeah, absolutely it's a crisis, and it changes a person, can change a person's perception about themselves, right? Obviously, that's a physical, I didn't say health, physical thing. When somebody loses a body part, it absolutely is a crisis situation, but the crisis comes from how you react to it. Because it's how just a second, Anna, it's how we're reacting to it, right? Am I adjusting my thoughts about it? All right. Anytime we have an operation, for example, and the doctor removes something, it can be a crisis. Losing, you have a soldier that goes to war and loses their arm or their leg. That's absolutely going to change the way your whole life is. And there was a lady I knew, her brother played the piano, and he had to work. It was like his big thing, right, outside of work. So his fingers were crushed on one hand. Well, not only did that change how he could live, but he's no longer able to do that in the same way. And yet in her husband's company, someone lost a finger in the machinery and reacted totally differently, even though it has to do with how we face it and how we adjust, right? So it's definitely so. I'm sorry, was it Anna that had something to say? Somebody, you put your hand down, so I don't.
Yes, it was all that you were saying, but I was thinking what he was saying. Is it internally and externally? Yes, because now emotionally you're thinking about what's happening to you, but you're thinking about what people are thinking about. Every time somebody see you, that people, not that they look at you funny, but sometimes, especially kids, they'll point at you and say that they might not have an arm, they might not have a limb. So yeah, I think it's externally and internally, emotionally, both ways, that you got to deal with and deal with it in your mind, how people are going to react and what you're going to think about yourself too.
Right. So it's our response to this, to the what we perceive as a threat. Okay, you can see that your spouse or whatever is talking a lot to a friend of yours or whatever, and you're thinking, what's going on? And you could think, oh, are they getting involved or whatever? And that could be, oh, you're an imagination on your part, or you could find out that they were planning a surprise birthday party, right? So we don't see the whole everything that's going around. Go ahead, Madeline.
So a crisis would have to be, even if it begins external, it would have to be internal also, even if you if you're able to deal with the situation, because there is some emotional that has to come into play for you to be able to say, all right, in Jesus Christ, I can handle this. The Lord is going to help me. Or even if you're not saved, I can handle this. I've got my family support, so it's not as traumatic as, people would think it is. But it would have to be, it has to be an eternal as well, even if it begins external. It has to be eternal, because your mindset has to say how it's going to handle, deal with, react to the situation.
Right. It has to do with how the person is reacting to the situation, and if they're in a vulnerable state. Okay, let's take the example of two different people or families Okay. And today, so many people are even spending more than what they've got, so they don't have money saved up. But if person A and person B are working for a company and they know that next week there's going to be some permanent layoffs. Okay. Person A has managed to have 3 months of bills saved up in the bank. And they know, well, I can get my resume and the type of job I have, there's a need for that out there. So I've got enough for me to get through this amount of time until I can get into another job. Person B has a rent or a house payment that is the majority of their salary, and they don't have any money or very little money saved up. So, and they're living and paying their bills according to each paycheck. If they get paid every month or every 2 weeks or every week, most people aren't paid every week anymore. Then they're just, when they get their money, they already have to spend it. It's already, they're paying on something or they have to pay it. So this person says, oh, what am I going to do? I don't have the money to pay my rent or my house payment in 2 weeks. Okay. So I don't have any training. I don't know how to get a resume. I've been in, so there's two different situations. One person has like a safety net prepared for them. And so they're just taking action. They're just going to go through these steps and until they get another job. The other person comes to us and they need help with food. They need help with finding training. They need help with childcare. They need help with, being able to pay their utilities. Well, who's in the crisis?
Right. The second person is in the crisis. And that's what I was just getting ready to say. For the first person, there is no crisis. It's a situation that arose at the workplace, but the first person is not in a crisis. A situation arose where there's going to be a layoff or whatever. I've got money to back me up for X amount of months or whatever. So it's not a crisis. They're
Right.
not in a crisis. But the second person is in a crisis because of their lifestyle, management of things.
Or even being underemployed. You've talked about that before. You're underemployed. You're not making a whole lot of money. So yeah. So, and we're here because supposedly we can be cool and calm and collected, right? And we can help map out those steps of what they need to do to walk through it. So, and also we need to be careful that we don't get kind of callous in our attitude because we're not facing it. We need to be compassionate and understand what they're going through. And it's not the time to say, well, if you had done this, you wouldn't be in this situation, like some parents do, right? So yeah, I don't know anybody that, in Tolan's example, that if they lost a limb or the use of a part of their body, if they lost their hearing or something happened to their eyesight or whatever, that wouldn't be affected by it. That would tend to be more in the apathy part where, you're just not really aware of something and, because it's a definite change. But to understand that when we talked about loss as, we have a physical progression of loss, that I have to accept that, I don't have the endurance that I had when I was 20 years old. right? If I'm going to try to do that kind of stuff that I was able to do, I'm going to be worn out and I'm going to physically pay for it. Go ahead, Tolan.
So who was that? Was that Anna?
That was Madeline.
Someone was Madeline, sir. So she said the first one wasn't a crisis, and when you was explaining it, she said the second one was, and she compared it to like she still has something to fall back on, you know, even though she was losing her job, right? But I was looking because I was thinking about crisis because this is what it's about. I went to the crisis book, and I remember in chapter 7, and it says 4 common elements of a crisis, and one of them is a vulnerable state.
Right.
And
That
sometimes
was what we talked about at the beginning, right?
Go ahead. Yeah, yes, ma'am. That's on page 132.
Right.
And it says a vulnerable state. And I know as being chaplain or just being in the service, the ministry service, we have to be aware that what we may feel as a crisis to someone else may not be a crisis to us, so to speak.
Right.
So we have to be very sensitive on how people interpret what they feel may be a crisis. And so even though she may have something to fall back on, losing her job, I don't know if whatever she has to fall back on can cover all her expenses. And she may find herself being put in a panic state or a depressed state because she's losing her job, because it's still a. So I basically brought that up to say, is it possible, even losing your job, that you can trigger a crisis in your life?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because there could be something else, because it could be your identity, right? So, I mean, if you get fired or laid off, I mean, it makes a difference, right? If somebody tells you you weren't doing a good job and you weren't adequate, that could affect you. So emotionally, in your self-perception. And you know, we do get, the first thing we ask people practically is, what do you do for a living, right? And we identify with that. So the thing about the crisis of losing our job, it's not just a financial thing, it could be identity. But if you've already got preparations made, if you already know how you can handle it, then you're not facing that panic state. If you go back, it talks about panic, right? Where does it say? Or maybe I just have it in my notes. No, in the 4 common elements of a crisis, when it talks about the state, is an attitude of panic or defeat. So our attitude about the situation determines our course. It's like our steering wheel. If we're so overwhelmed with it, we're turning toward disaster, we're turning to the left, and we're going to run into a wall. But if we're understanding that there's ways, or made, if we have a plan or have made preparation, or understand how we can get through it, or we know that it's not the end of the world, you know, then we're going straight. We keep going, directing our vehicle forward. And so it's not a crisis. It's just another thing we have to deal with. You know, when you've had a rough day and you go home and somebody breaks a dish, okay? How are you going to deal with it? Well, or if my granddaughter dumps the food on the floor, you know, depending if I'm irritated or whatever, what do? We just get the dustpan or the broom or the mop and we just sweep it up and we just throw the stuff out. But if I'm stressed, or if we're, you know, had that rough day at work or outside in wherever our journey takes us, you know, if you go to the store and this was happening and this person and somebody cut you off, and then you went to the bank to get some money and they were out of, the ATM was being refilled, so you couldn't get it out and you couldn't sit around and wait and you had to go home and you didn't have the money to go do this, that what you needed. Then there's all these things piling up and there's that last straw, the precipitating factor that makes us go into crisis mode, right? And then we have the physical responses, right? That the adrenaline and the different stuff, that the cortisol that's like shooting out and making us all frenzied or whatever. So it involves emotional, and it's what if our brain isn't connecting, but the emotional side and the practical side and everything isn't working together, then we're just kind of like at this impasse that we just want to throw our hands up and maybe throw something against the wall, right? So you kind of proceeded a little bit there, but so when we'll go back to implementing the intervention, we want to listen to what's going on and hear what they're saying, assess the situation and what has happened and what can be done about it. Reassure them, normalize it, let them know that, there's other people that have gone through this. Your reactions are common, right? It's not unusual to lose it when you have an emergency situation and get all frazzled and need some help and support. And when I reassure them is not to say it's going to be all right, but let them know that they have the support, that you're going to be there, that we're going to work through a plan to help you get through that. Help them find the support. Be that support. Be there for them in when they need someone to turn to, if they need a shoulder to cry on, if they need to vent, if they need help with resources, if they need a plan of action. Let them know that you're walking along with them when sometimes we can't do anything about it, but just having somebody there with us, that we're not alone, makes a tremendous difference in how we are able to navigate emergencies, right? So we listen, assess, normalize, we reassure them, we give them support, we help them form a plan. This is, if we do, let's try these. There's these different steps. We can go this way, we can choose B, we can go C, D. If we do C, then after that we have to do X, Y, Z. These are the different steps that we can say. We'll educate them. Let them know that, first of all, these are some of the feelings that and responses and bodily reactions that happen when we're in this type of state, but also help them to know that what different changes could come about by the actions, the decisions that they make. If you decide to not just give up and not pay this bill because you want this or have to cover this emergency expense, you could get your lights turned off, you could lose this, they could implement a foreclosure. We let them know what are the ensuing results of the actions that we do or don't take. And then we monitor. We kind of keep an eye on how they're doing it because they're the ones that have to do it. So those are the steps of intervention. So then once we make a plan, we help them take the actions. Many times people are not able to make a decision and take a step forward. If you're afraid, you're not even going to open the door and go out and get into the car to go to the file for unemployment. Right, all this stuff now you can do online, but you're not. I don't even want to go buy the groceries, right? Okay. So one of the things we do need to take steps. If you don't do anything about it, it's not going to get better. Restore balance. Okay. They're seeing it all from the dark, negative side, from their emotional side, but we're going to help. It's all one-sided. They're only seeing one side of the situation. If they have a rupture of a relationship, they're only seeing it from their side of the event. But there's two sides to every story, right? So we're trying to make everything even with them and see things with a balanced scale, right? You've got the Lady Liberty, you see this, you put certain things on the scale and it goes down. We're trying to even out how they're looking at the situation. Okay. Foster hope and positive expectations. Well, I'm never going to get another job. I'm never going to have another relationship like this again. I'm never going to be able to do that. And, we don't want to make it so that there's unrealistic expectations and dreams and, platitudes that, oh, it's all going to be all right, because we see all types of situations that it doesn't even seem like it got any better. We have Christians living all over the world where people all around them are being persecuted and killed, and they're losing their jobs and their homes are being destroyed. So we know that it's not all going to work out and be a bed of roses, but we can show them that by taking certain steps, by moving in this direction, you could be on the road to recovery. And other people have done X, Y, Z, and this is what the results were. So you might have a humongous bill that it doesn't matter how you got it. I'm not going to go into that right now, but if you keep paying on it, keep paying on it, keep paying on it, then they're not going to, it's not going to go into a debt collection, right? In our country, you can get medical treatment. They will treat you and you can pay on it for the rest of your life, but you can get the treatment that you want, right? Or that you need. So you can keep paying on it. You can, and as long as you keep doing this and this and this is what you can reasonably expect. So this support comes in different ways. What kind of ways do you feel most supported? Well, you want to do that. I was just trying to look and see if anybody had their hands. What type of ways do you feel most supported? Do you want somebody to walk alongside you? Do you need physical reinsurance? Do you like to hear another side of the story? What are some of the different ways you can support people then? If you're not going to say what.
Yeah. Sister Trish,
Go ahead.
is you asking a question or you just giving a statement?
No, I'm asking, I was asking a question, but nobody was answering. So I'm filling in.
Because I thought you was giving a statement. So you mentioned different ways to be supportive.
Mhm.
I would think it depends on, excuse me, I think the situation and the individual. Sometimes you got to walk alongside with the person. And sometimes, you probably have to give more of yourself, and because they and a lot of them. So it depends on the individual and the situation. That's how, and we just need to be aware how to assess that situation.
Exactly. Exactly. I was thinking the same thing, Tolan, that it depends on whatever situation the person is in, whether they need you to listen to what they're saying, whether they need you to walk beside them, whether they need hands-on support, you know, whether they need some financial support. It depends on whatever that particular situation is going on with that individual.
Okay, so basically you're giving me some of the different examples of ways that it's not a cookie cutter solution too, right? Sometimes we need to follow up more closely with people. And the scripture came to me where it talks about, you know, it might be in James, because James is real practical, about, you know, don't just say be warmed and be filled and I'm going to pray for you, brother. Sometimes it requires, oh, you going and help digging up this thing in their backyard and help to do whatever with the drain, right? Or sometimes it would require that we give them some money or some food. And I think, or your couch to sleep on at night. You know, we're real good about farming things out, you know, and there's exactly it. We need to find what is the situation for them and what can we do to help them out. And the more people that we're dealing with, I mean, obviously you can't be giving up everybody money, but finding the financial needs. But sometimes we do. You know, a friend has something happen and you give them some money, right? And when you're giving them the money, we need to have the attitude that it's a gift, even if we say, even if you've agreed that it's a loan. That's a totally another situation, that I have this amount of money, but I need to get it back. You know, if they have a situation. I had a friend that they wanted to do something. It was when we were in Belgium, and I think there was something going on in their country, and they wanted to take a trip to go back there to resolve it or something like that. And I said, well, I've got this amount of money that I got when somebody died. My aunt died, and that I'm not using at this particular moment. It's in the bank, and I can lend it to you, but I'm going to need to have you give it back to me because I'm going to need it in the future. And they didn't want it because they wanted a gift. Right. So that's a kind of situation we need to make clear as well. So we provide support. We need to help keep them focused on solving the problem. I was dealing with this one lady for a long time, and it kept going around and around in circles. She needed the emotional support. She had some emotional issues, but she wasn't doing anything about breaking that cycle. She just wanted to cry about it and not do anything about it. And it got to the point where there was nothing I could do anymore because it was just going around in this perpetual circle. So we need to help them focus not on their emotions, not on the past, not on what could happen, but let's work on finding a way to go forward out of this situation. Understand and assess the self-image. We have, I have a fact sheet here. I think it says in my notes, but I don't see the fact sheet here about assessing that. So I'd have to look into where that resource is. but also, how does this affect them, their view of themselves as a person? And know where they're at. Are they confident? Do they know who they are in the Lord? Do they feel like a failure? And help them. Okay. And instill self-reliance. Today, it seems like everybody is looking to the government to answer their problems. Or they're looking to the church. I have a friend that always says, well, why doesn't the church do this? Or why doesn't the church do that? And, we as Christians are part of a body, right? We're supposed to help each other. But in the end, getting out of the problem is our own responsibility. That somebody else isn't always going to bail us out. We have to be able to direct the steps and do them ourselves. We can walk with the person to help them go through the steps. Like if someone dies and you need to go with them to do the title of the car and to help them call the insurance companies, or go with them to the funeral home or file different paperwork. But in the end, we have to help them know that they can do this and we're here to help them. That it's not going to happen unless they put their own step forward. Go ahead, Madeline.
I think, because I hear you bring this up a lot about people depending on the government. I think the vast majority of people here in America do not look for the government for a bailout, maybe a hand up for a short period of time to assist. But I think in all that people have given, and I guess I really look as a Black person and my people in building this country and making this country what it is, that for the most part we haven't been given credit for or compensation for. So I think that the government should be assisting and helping out. I mean, and even still with all that, we still pay our taxes and we give in. We give what we're supposed to give, as Jesus said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But I don't even think the vast, I know from looking at statistics and everything, the vast amount of Americans are not looking for the government for a handout, and they are self-relying on themselves. But of course, you have situations in anything and everything where you have those who want a handout all the time. But that's not the vast majority of people. So I think what we really need to concentrate on is understanding and assess that self-image, because that's where a lot of people lose and don't aren't able to pick up the pieces because they feel that they possibly can't. And you have to let them know, in God, in Jesus, all things are possible through Christ who strengthens us.
Right, I would have to agree with you. And if you've been told all your life that you're no good, or it's not your fault, a lot of parents these days or whatever, they don't let their children be corrected by school authorities or whatever. So we do need to encourage people to see themselves through the lens of God, and that these things we are able to be doing it. And I think, you know, we need to become more aware. I think that just because I'm in this setting, not everything is the way. It's not like you're talking about. It's not the whole group. There is a group, and there's this group, and there's that group. So it's not, I guess we have to be aware of generalizing based on some of our experience, that this is not prevalent in every sector. So I thank you for bringing that up and that point up, and bring our attention to that, you know, it all depends on what we're told. When I was younger, I knew a lady became a Christian. She was older than me, and her family was something like gypsies or whatever. And her parents taught her to steal and beg to take care of themselves. So depending on our situation, I mean, and then of course she grew up and became a Christian and had a family, and, you know, God, you could see that that's not the way, but, you know, based on our environment, we get certain attitudes, right? So we need to help people know who they are, but also give them the tools to be self-reliant. Because, like, if you look at a little child, they say, help me, but what they mean is you do it. So as we get older, you know, we know that it's not a scripture and it's not true. God doesn't help those that helps themselves. That's not, you know, totally true, because we can only do all things through the strength of Christ. So there is a balance in how we need to see what's going on around us in our environment. So understanding and help people take a look at who they are and what they're able to do. You know, when a lot of kids think, well, I'm just going to go and be a professional athlete, whatever, you know, but when they have to take a look at, as they're going through school or whatever, they don't have the physical ability to get on a college team and get into professional sports. You have to be realistic about what we're able to do. And that's, you know, hard for us to deal with people about being realistic and seeing things as they really are, without being deflating or taking it all on ourselves. Because a lot of the time, when I'm talking about self-reliance, sometimes there's some people that their way of helping is to do it, and that doesn't help us if our mom is always doing it for us, right? So we want to help them develop the skills to be able to navigate on their own. Okay, any other comments? Because we've reached the end of, and time to talk about the homework for the students is to read the first part of the Crisis and Trauma book, chapter 11. And the homework questions that are in the book are from the Crisis and Trauma reading, and the conclusion chapter at the end of that book might be needed to help with these homework questions. Any